Hello everyone, this is AndresRestart, and today I would like to have a simple, relaxed discussion on whether we could be seeing the next 3D Zelda announced in this rumored upcoming Nintendo Direct. There are many rumors suggesting a Direct could be happening very soon, like so soon, like the end of this week soon. Take it with a grain of salt, we don't know for sure. I do feel pretty confident about this one, but again, you never really know. Point is though, many are expecting a Direct soon, and with this Direct, it raises the question, could we be seeing a major announcement for the next 3D Zelda? And honestly, I have not been expecting an announcement for the next 3D Zelda so soon. But people have been talking about it, and have been thinking about it a little bit more, and I don't think we should rule out the possibility entirely, and it actually might be more likely than some people are thinking. And that's what I want to dive further into today. But before going forward, let me point out I have this goal to reach 60,000 subscribers, so if you find yourself enjoying my content, your subscription would be appreciated. So as I said earlier, this is going to be more of a simple video. I'll just be mostly having Tears of the Kingdom and Soul Calibur 2 gameplay in the background here. But to the point, is it time for Nintendo to announce the next proper 3D Zelda game? And when I say that, I mean either just straight up the next brand new mainline 3D Zelda game, or a ambitious remake. And as many of you know, I've been theorizing about an ambitious remake of Ocarina of Time for a few years already, and so maybe it could be that, but really any sort of major 3D Zelda offering. Does it make sense for Nintendo to announce something soon? And so when considering the history of things here, in the beginning of the Switch era, we had Breath of the Wild, so there was no need to announce a future 3D Zelda game so soon. For Wii U, however, they did a lot. In the lead up to the release of the console, they had this exciting tech demo that was a greatly enhanced version of Twilight Princess basically, but then a few months after release, Wii U came out holiday 2012, in a Nintendo Direct in January of 2013, they announced two Zelda games. They announced Zelda U. They didn't say too much on it, they just talked about how they wanted to change the conventions of Zelda, but they also announced Wind Waker HD, which looked pretty awesome at the time. Or consider the announcement of Ocarina of Time 3D announced June of 2010, the 3DS came out later in 2010, and then we go back to the Nintendo GameCube. They showed off the Wind Waker for the first time in 2001, the launch year of the GameCube. So there is a history of Nintendo revealing Zelda, 3D Zelda, early on in the beginning of their console generations. But most of the exceptions, there's usually some sort of Zelda game at launch, and so you could argue that we had a decent amount of Zelda at launch. Nintendo had the Switch 2 editions of Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. They had Soul Calibur 2 in Nintendo Classics, which has Link from Ocarina of Time, and also Wind Waker as well in Nintendo Classics. And on top of that, there are free upgrades for both the Link's Awakening Remake and Echoes of Wisdom for Switch 2. So there's actually a decent amount of little Zelda offerings that have all come out at the same time for the launch of the console. But I don't consider any of these things to be super substantial. The Switch 2 editions of Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom I don't think are going to be very big needle movers. I don't consider them to be as substantial releases as like a Wind Waker HD or even a Skyward Sword HD. We've seen that the sales of Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom Switch 2 edition do not appear to be that strong. In this list of the June 2025 United States top 20 best-selling games, they are not there. Now it should be pointed out, not all digital sales are being accounted for here, but that also applies to Mario Kart World, and it's number 3 on the list. So, all I'm saying is that I feel like Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, if they were more substantial releases like even a Skyward Sword HD or a Link's Awakening remake, they would be higher up on this list significantly, and they're not. In other words, they are not really big needle movers, and I don't think Nintendo looks at them at this way. I don't think it's a big shocker to them. And so with that in mind, I think you can argue that we can exclude these from the pattern of having some sort of substantial Zelda thing in the beginning of the generation. There really hasn't been anything substantial Zelda to start off the Switch 2 generation, and so I still think it's meaningful to have something substantial Zelda early on. But I will say this, I do think all the Zelda stuff we've gotten this year is the Zelda stuff we've gotten this year. I do not expect anything else to come out this year. But that doesn't mean they can't announce something though. Some people might argue, however, that we also just got Echoes of Wisdom last year. That's a mainline new 2D top-down Zelda game. But when considering the history of things here, I don't think Echoes of Wisdom coming out last year really gives us any reason to doubt an announcement this year. We look at 2019, Link's Awakening was announced and released in the same year that Tears of the Kingdom was announced. So really, I don't think the announcements of any sort of 2D Zelda offering should impact our thinking on when 3D Zelda can be announced. Now, in terms of coming out, I do think it impacts that, because we've seen that 2D Zeldas have come out in years where we don't get 3D Zelda. Now that Nintendo's focusing on just one platform, I do think they use 2D Zelda games to help bridge the gaps between 3D Zelda games. And maybe the best thing to consider here is just when the next Zelda game would be coming out, because maybe that would then suggest when Nintendo would be announcing this. And the thing about that is that we've seen that Nintendo's had increasingly longer and longer development cycles when it comes to mainline new Zelda games. Skyward Sword came out in 2011, Breath of the Wild came out early 2017, and Tears of the Kingdom, a direct sequel to Breath of the Wild using the same art style, building upon the same engine, same assets, still didn't come out until May of 2023, more than 6 years later. Now, I do think COVID impacted the development cycle for Tears of the Kingdom. It probably would have come out sooner, but I think the point still stands here that Zelda development cycles are significant, and the trend has been that they've been getting longer, so I don't think we should be expecting the next 3D Zelda anytime soon. It's only been 2 years since Tears of the Kingdom. If we're lucky, it could come out 3 years from now, but that's if we're lucky, and that's not what the trend has been suggesting we should be expecting. However, I do think Nintendo acknowledges this as a problem, and it's something they need to address, which brings me back to the idea of an ambitious remake, which we've heard rumors for, we've seen a lot of evidence for, we've talked about this in a variety of other videos. I do think a remake is coming in between, and I do think that's the thing that'll come out in either 2026 or 2027. And so could something like that be announced fairly soon, an ambitious remake? The thing about a remake, though, is that traditionally we don't see the remakes have very long turnarounds between reveal and release. Almost always it's less than a year, but if this is a very big ambitious one where there's going to be some changes and this is going to be something that's truly going to be meant to tide over Zelda fans for some time before the next proper brand new 3D Zelda game, then maybe we could be looking at a longer turnaround here between reveal and release. However, I also think there's a possibility that this Ocarina of Time remake doesn't actually make it out in time for Zelda's 40th anniversary. Even though I think it makes a lot of sense and I've argued it in the past, I've also realized another possibility here where they might put it out after the live-action Zelda movie in early 2027 to do something similar to what they did back in 2023 with Mario. The Mario movie came out early 2023, and Mario Wonder was announced immediately afterwards and was a big holiday release. So they may have a similar plan for Zelda. Of course, the other possibility is they have Zelda come out before the movie, and we see it having increased sales thanks to the movie, similar to what we saw of what the Mario movie did, how the Mario movie boosted the popularity of Mario overall, and a whole bunch of games that had come out on Switch 1 that were Mario related saw boosted sales be leading up to that Mario movie's release. And then on top of that, you would be able to celebrate Zelda's 40th anniversary with a significant release. I do think that also makes a lot of sense, and I think that's probably the more desirable thing to do, especially because you want to get out something substantial Zelda sooner than later for the new generation of Switch 2, but that really comes down to whether the game is ready or not. And so if I had to place my bets, I would say odds are we're not going to see Ocarina of Time remake or whatever they might be remaking in this next Nintendo Direct. For a few reasons. One, it might not even be coming out until 2027, but even if it is going to be ready for 2026 to celebrate the 40th anniversary, we see with a lot of remakes and remasters from Nintendo, they like to have quicker turnarounds here, so they may not want to announce it so soon in advance. But I will not rule out the possibility entirely because this may be a more ambitious remake, and so they may want to treat it with a longer turnaround, more time to hype it up and advertise it, use it as something to excite the fan base for next year, if it's ready for next year. So there's a possibility, I just don't think it's the most likely possibility. But maybe the most likely possibility is that Nintendo does tease the next mainline new Zelda game, and there will be things coming out in between, as we've seen with different releases, like with Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. So many different Zelda games came out in between the announcements and releases for these bigger games. So maybe the same could happen this time around, where they will announce the next new Zelda game, maybe provide some level of a teaser, and there will be other major things coming out in between, like another new 2D Zelda game, maybe a remake, maybe something else. And at least then, you show the fan base something to get them super excited and anticipating for what's to come down the road. which is something Nintendo has done many times for prior generations. Of course, maybe you can also argue that Nintendo might look at what they've done with Breath and Tears, and that's a nice enough an enhancement that gives Zelda fans something to chew on and think about until they have other exciting things to talk about for the 40th anniversary next year. I haven't even mentioned this part to the equation yet, but there is also Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment. Now, this is a spin-off. I don't think we should take it as seriously as a mainline 3D Zelda release, but it is still something else Zelda that is somewhat substantial. When you factor this in conjunction with everything else that we just got, and that this is probably going to be talked about in the next Nintendo Direct, I do think that takes away a little bit more of the chances of us seeing something else there. That all said, I go back to 2019, we saw Link's Awakening Remake in the Direct, and yet still at the end, what else was there? The teaser for the next big Zelda game, which we eventually came to know as Tears of the Kingdom. And on that note, let me be clear about something else here. If we get something 3D Zelda related, it would absolutely be a teaser at the very end of the show. It would be the last final big thing. Maybe it could be like the penultimate one, like right before the last big thing. I suppose that's a possibility. Maybe Aonuma, the producer of the Zelda series, wants to come out and say some things about the future of Zelda. That is possible. And actually, maybe instead what happens is there will be a moment where he talks a little bit more about Age of Imprisonment, and maybe he gives us a nugget on the future of Zelda and just says that they're working on it or something like that, but nothing too substantial. That possibility is there, but in terms of actually seeing something, the form in which we will see it will be in a teaser. And maybe another reason why I'm so skeptical of us seeing a Zelda teaser next is because there is this rumor going around right now that supposedly the final big thing that's going to be shown off in this July Nintendo Direct is going to be Animal Crossing. This is coming from Wood from Beat 'em Ups. He said this during his Nintendo podcast earlier in the month. He was one of the first to talk about how there would be a July Nintendo Direct, and now many other sources have come out to support the idea. He wasn't the very first, but he was one of the first. So maybe this rumor turns out to be true. And so if we're in a scenario where we're getting an Animal Crossing teaser at the end, then we're probably not getting a Zelda teaser as well that's still a ways off. And that is something else to consider here, that there are other Nintendo IP that Nintendo may want to focus on right now, like maybe Animal Crossing. For sure, Metroid Prime 4. Mario's 40th anniversary is approaching. There's a lot of possibilities with that. So with these things in mind, I have been tempering my expectations. So ultimately, considering everything here, my expectations are that we're probably not going to see the next 3D Zelda in this Nintendo Direct. However, I don't think we should rule out the possibility entirely, because historically speaking, Nintendo has shown off something ambitious Zelda early on for many generations. I don't think the Switch 2 editions of Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom are that substantial that would take the place of a big reveal like this necessarily. And it has already been 2 years since Tears of the Kingdom. Nintendo could have something ready to show off, and they may want to have something shown off even if it is a little bit of a ways off to get people invested into Switch 2 early on. But what do you all think? Do you think there's an above 50% chance that we see the next 3D Zelda in this Nintendo Direct? I'm thinking it's below a 50% chance, but we'll see. Anyways, everyone, this is AndresRestart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I'll see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.